Are you searching for a deeper understanding of yourself and your place in the world? Do you yearn for more balance, more peace, and purpose in your life? Well, look no further than the Intuitive Revolution podcast, your trusted source for holistic insights and intuitive guidance. I'm your host, Alicia Farricielli, and I am ready to take you on a journey to inner peace and balanced well-being.
Intuitive Revolution podcast. I'm your host, Alicia Farricielli, and today we have Sophia with us. We're going to learn all kinds of cool stuff about EFT, some ways that you can release some emotional stress, and then her journey through that as well, and how she got certified in this. So welcome to the show, Sophia.
Oh, thank you for inviting me. It's an honor to be on your show.
How did you go from chronic illness to healing through EFT? And then tell our listeners a little bit what EFT is.
Absolutely. After kind of being ill and then working in the medical field and nothing changing for over 14 years, well, during that period, let me backtrack. I always had questions. How did I get sick almost overnight? So it wasn't like a progressive thing. And so I said, the body just can't just get sick overnight. There has to be symptoms before. But here I am, 14 years struggling with this. And I said, there has to be another way out. And I had started researching. And the good news was, even within the medical model, I was very conservative because I would have had I would have had an organ removed out. So I was very conservative and I had good physicians, but it still wasn't providing the answers. So I had heard about EFT many years before. I said, it's too simple. This thing does not work. And I had also read Dr. Joe Dispenza's books, and I said, no, he's out there. So I dismissed them. And I had read some spiritual books. I read them all, and they made sense to me, but it wasn't going to work for me. So that was the new comment on this one, because my background is my training is medical, meaning in epidemiology. So I had read these, I think there were 98, and I had discussed them with someone who has a lot of medical knowledge, and they were purely accurate. So, and the decision was, well, it's not going to work for me. It works for these other people, but I'm excluded. But the bottom line is I was suffering, and I was headed for slow death. Now, at this point, after many reoccurrences, it was going to be a progressive, slow death, and I could not leave overnight. If I was gone overnight or maybe a week, I'd be out. I think I was ready to go. And so I went back and reread the same books, meaning, looking at Dr. Joe Dispenza, and that made a lot of sense to me now this time around. But there was a component that was missing. And the component was, I did not know what emotions were, and I could not get what he means to master your emotions and how to be in this positive state most of the time. And all I knew is I was getting frustrated. I was getting more frustrated every day. So I said, okay, after I had tried Psyche, the body code, hypnosis, and every time I would try something, I would do at least 30 sessions. So we're not talking one or two. We're talking a big lump of sessions. I said, I'll reconsider EFT. Found a lovely practitioner. And boy, did I have emotions. And in the beginning, we almost worked 7 days a week. Literally, almost 7 days. And she was nice enough to work, even though she didn't work on the weekends, to work on the weekends. And I started after a little bit, I started having glimpses of some happiness. And then after a while, I started feeling better, though it was not an easy journey. And ultimately, between the combination of, what Dr. Joe Dispenza teaches and EFT, I think they have to go, for me, they had to go together. I started seeing changes. And the spheres that I had and all the stuff, not all of them are gone because, I'm a work in progress, but there's a very different attitude that I have than what I had years ago. I think you wouldn't recognize me. I could get, if I put my mind to it, I could get very into it and I'd get very aggressive and I was like a pit bull. And now not that I don't have the drive, I still have the drive, but I am a more mellow or easygoing person, which ultimately affects the body. So let's talk, what is EFT and why it's so important to tackle both aspects. So EFT is a combination of cognitive psychotherapy plus using the acupuncture meridian point. So basically doing acupuncture without needles, right? And so while tapping on these body meridians, wherever they are, and each one corresponds to a particular organ and an emotion, we release energy or emotions, let's say better, or energy that gets stuck in the body. Why is that important? Because energy carries information and emotions is an energy in motion. So when we were young and weren't able to process that emotion, it got stuck. There is no flow to the body. The body is a battery and it's electric. And when the emotions get stuck, I'm sure you've had, because you look very young to me, you've had Walkman in your life where you know what it was, and you left your battery in there, maybe 6 months, didn't check it, and there was a fluid that came out, and you try to turn the Walkman on, and it didn't work. Well, the same thing, as an analogy, happens in the body. If the emotions don't flow, they oxidize or they out in the body, and there is no way the cells can communicate. The electrical voltage between the cells drops, and that's what causes disease. Disease is a lowering of frequency in the body. That's basically what it is. So that's why the importance of addressing the emotions, right? And the good thing about EFT is we have 6 bodies, but in this case, we'll address the 3, the mental, the physical, and the emotional. And it addresses it because the tapping, bringing you also in the present moment. You have the mental because you're talking your story, so your personality gets satisfied by talking because what you resist persists, so you allow yourself to talk. And it has been shown clinically that's one of the fastest modalities compared to psychotherapy. And the research indicates there are over 300 studies that it downregulates 6 genes of stress, and one of them is cortisol. And we all know what cortisol does to the body. It activates the sympathetic nervous system.
How you didn't touch with your emotions at all. You're kind of like, I don't know this. And all of a sudden you did a tapping session. You're like, whoa, there they are. And it's like almost come out. So I feel like we have so many people that walk around today that have the same situation going on where they're not in touch with their emotions. They say, well, they feel almost emotionless, or maybe they have too many emotions going on. They don't know how to regulate it. And it's really fascinating how qualities, energy, and then it's almost a mind, and you're working your mind too at the same time, starts to heal stuff. So, I work with my clients more on like the emotion, to get the emotional portion out of it. It's fascinated how it works with illnesses and works with the physical health portion of it.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us a little bit about some people that you've worked with and some stories that you have for.
So I'll make a caveat. People younger than 35 usually heal much faster, just because the personality is not so strong, solidified. So after 35, the personality gets very strong. It's harder to break habits. So I've had a lot of people with panic attacks that they heal them in less than 10 sessions or about 10 sessions, which is pretty fast if you've had panic attacks most of your life. I've had people who basically would be constantly in a rage and now they're serene, similar. Then I've had a lady who actually had Tourette's. And interestingly enough, because I do what they call hacking reality, she was a little over mid-40s. So she had had it since the age of 4. And intuitively, I knew it was not the age of 4. So with EFT and this other modality, which is called hacking reality, some people know it as matrix reimprinting. The reason for the name is because I'm trained from someone else and he does extra stuff to it. So the two modalities can't have the same name. We did her birth reimprint. So at the second trimester, so we were working on the second trimester while she's in the womb, she starts, the Tourette's was out of hand, like on the session. And I asked her, what is she experiencing as the embryo? Because she's in the womb. And she gets this feeling, or she sees a vision, that her mother's head is being slammed on the crib. And every time the mom got slammed, she would have the movement, because she would have these jerky movements like this. And then some people with Tourette's, their language gets out of hand. Obviously, she had a lot of anger for what was happening, because the mother was transmitting. And once that was cleared, the Tourette symptoms dissipated. So that was a very nice experience for me. To see that, how it worked. And we're not talking working months or years here. So we're talking maybe close to a little over about 10 sessions. The longer sessions, though, they're not like an hour, they're like an hour and a half, because you can't do this work in 60 minutes. So that was really amazing. Now, I have worked with people, and I know I'm going to go a little out there. People changing jumping timelines. So they jump to a parallel timeline, and the characters are there, but they're different. So some people can solidify it, and some people go in and out. It takes a while, because it's very hard for us to believe that we're moving to a parallel timeline. And let me address it from a healing point of view. When you're healing, you're not healing this body. It's not this body that's being healed. Your thoughts, emotions, and deeds, and mostly your thoughts and emotions, are changing. Therefore, your vibration and frequency has changed, and you're changing your tuner, in the TV, and you're moving to a parallel you that's healthier, has a healthier body. And that's actually what's happening.
I feel like that's what Dr. Joe really speaks about. I'll call him Dr. Joe. That's basically what he's getting at. And a lot of people don't quite understand that. And so going into the meditative state, you can get into, really does start changing that paradigm. So thanks for bringing that up. A little bit more about hacking reality, kind of what exactly it is, and with your clients on that.
Okay, so once we clear the emotional charge or the trauma, let's say it's a very traumatic experience, and sometimes it doesn't clear in one session, because I don't want people to get this idea that the cure is instantly, though it can happen, and for many times it happens, but it's not years, okay? So it's a few sessions. Once the traumatic experience is cleared, then let me address why is that important. Traumatic memories are usually stored as high definition in the hippocampus, and they're not time-stamped properly, and they're always replaying, like having a needle on a record player that got stuck. So it's always replaying in the background. That's why trauma really does a havoc in the body. So, or it could be a bad memory, whatever it is. So once that is cleared and everything is neutral, then actually ask that version of you, because we're always working with the version that got stuck. We're not working with the individual person at the now. We're asking that person how they would have liked that to have played out, and what would be the new emotion, which is usually a positive emotion, and the new belief, and we create an image. And so we re-imprint the image by visualizing, by imagining it, by feeling it, by giving it form, bringing it inside the body, and then sending it to all the timelines. Now, if you do that Usually then the client does the practice like for 5 minutes a day on their own. If you do that long enough, what you're doing is you're wiring two different new neurons. So because memories are stored between neurons. So now you're re-imprinting and wiring in your brain new experience. So ultimately you jump to that parallel timeline, and that parallel timeline has a different story. So a lot of my memories from my past have almost diminished, or they're nulled out. And some of them I said, did I really went through that? I'm not really sure. Or if I did, it doesn't really matter anymore. So that's what happens, but it does require some consistency. And it's not like I did it once and magically I'm in the new timeline. Often you go in the timeline and you lose it and you beat yourself up. Oh my goodness, I lost it again. And then eventually you solidify the new timeline. That's how it happens.
Working out. So, if you go for a little while and you stop, then you're not going to get the benefits of it. If you go one time, you go to the gym one time, which is great, go to the gym, but it's not going to do the same benefits as continuously going over and over and over again. And then always, if you stop what you're doing, you stop the healing process, stop the gym process, fitness process, you can always jump back in. You may have to work a little harder to get to that point, but you're still getting the benefits of it. So it's like, you don't need to stop working on yourself. I love that you're bringing the science to, I call the woo in a way, because as kind of practitioners, we're walking around telling people like, this is what you do, but the science behind it, just a whole different other people that aren't familiar with it. So you some people that are kind of like, well, this just sounds like really crazy stuff to them.
First of all, I'd say give it a try. You're going to see the benefits. And then I'm going to say, perhaps research it. So we have the double slit experiment that actually shows where you put your awareness or your energy, you're collapsing that reality. And that lines up with the Bible reference, in my house are many mansions, right? So the double slit experiment, for people that don't know, is they got two slits, and you would assume that if you send a little particles, you're going to get two lines. There are two slits. You're going to get on the opposite end. There's like a wall that you get two lines. But then they decided to do photons. So you would assume that you shoot photons through with a laser, you're going to get two lines. Well, they did not get two lines. They got more than two lines, which indicates they got multiple lines, which indicates what everybody's been teaching, infinite potential. So when you put an observer, and the observer can be a cat, a dog, or a computer, you get two lines. So once it's observed, you get two lines. So it's a combination of quantum physics. Donald Hoffman talks about it. Campbell talks about Tom Campbell. So, and we already know that we do not exist in solid form. Is when we put our attention on it, form gets created. Now we have the double slit quantum eraser that tells us that it's a little more complicated. I'm not going to explain the experiment, but the moment of observation, it goes back in time and changes what was already recorded, which means if you change your attitude now, you're actually changing your past. And if we use tools like hacking reality to keep rewriting that past is altered. And then, of course, we got the last Nobel Prize in 2022 for non-locality and proving that particles are entangled. So this can't be woo if there are 3 Nobel Prizes and so many other physicists, and we have testimonials from people. But let's assume it is. I'm going to go that route because we do know we have the placebo effect. So what do you have to lose if you followed all the steps, and the placebo effect in this case seems to be higher than the 30%? It's close to 50 or 60. Your life changes. Does it really matter if it's woo at this point?
I think so much that's kind of like, I mean, you probably felt that way at the very beginning. I know my past kind of felt the way like, oh, well, if it doesn't make sense, like it can't be real, like it's just out there. It work. But you're not, just didn't open my mind up to it until I was actually at the bottom of whatever. I'm like, I'm out of options. So it sounds like you kind of with the same thing. I'm out of options, and let's just see. Placebo does work. If it's a placebo effect on it. Yeah, that's really cool. How, tend to work out, and it's like things walk into your path at the right time that they need to on it. It didn't work, and it was not a real thing before because you doubted it before. It wouldn't have worked. Because I feel like you can walk into, and you can take all the medication, you can take all the stuff, whatever you knew, whatever path you're taking. And if you don't believe it's going to work, I don't think it's going to work. Because it is already made up, and your mind is so much, to me, is like the core of your body.
Correct. EFT, though, tends to have more positive results, even if you go in as if it doesn't work, as long as you're present for the session, because you are actually releasing automatically by tapping, and it does bring you to a calmer state. So, and you're addressing the belief, I don't believe it's going to work. So it actually gets slower, and magically it does work. Not magically, but it appears to us magically it works.
It's amazing because you're tapping, you're moving the energies of your body, and you're also your brain at the same time. And I think it's so important, especially if you're go back and doing the hacky reality, which to me is like rewriting your timeline, rewriting your past, and changing your story. The two of those together, such a powerful combination. Of that, and then to start to rewrite everything. So you're taking care of the future, the present, and the past.
Correct. And often enough, once the person has worked with me for a few sessions, and they've gotten able to connect emotionally, I often connect them with the future self, and I bring the future self back into the timeline to give them advice or handle a situation. So that is very helpful. So we have the past self that got stuck, that we neutralized and changed the story, and we're also bringing the future self to connect, to bring advice. Because if I give advice, well, it works for you, it's not going to work for me. So a lot of times I have clients that doubt, and I write the notes with the future self, and obviously I let them write them down themselves after the session, or I give them to them, and they have evidence. They come back to me because we all go through a doubtful state. There's not a possibility this is going to change. So I said, well, how many times have we connected with your future self? And what did the future self say? Or what is the advice that the future self is giving? And then the disbelief gets less because they can't doubt it, because I didn't say it. It's their own future self that said it.
Putting the responsibility back on them. Basically, responsibility. It's like, so as healers, we look at it, we're like, oh, you healed someone. It's like, no, actually, the person actually heals themselves, because we can't physically heal someone. We can put tools to them, but they have to actually, their bodies, their mind, everything heals themselves. Talk about some meta consciousness and advanced techniques in healing.
Okay.
You're training on that.
So metaconsciousness is the biological cause for disease. So in the medical model, what we do is we treat symptoms, and we don't address the challenging situation, what's causing it, right? And there have been a few physicians, and Dr. Joe teaches it, but there's been a few physicians or researchers, I should say, one in the 40s and one that actually proved that the condition is in the field, right? So it's not in the body. The pattern is in the field first, and then it shows up in the body. So when you remove, and let's take an example of removing an organ because of whatever condition. So let's say you had cancer and you removed both of your breasts. And but you didn't address the emotional component. Often enough, what happens is a few years later, they did all the chemo, they did whatever it is that they did. Somehow the same cancer shows up in another organ. People think it's metastasis, and it's not. What it is the challenge was not resolved. And now, since that tissue is not there, it's going to find the closest other tissue it can show up. So meta-consciousness was created originally based on German new medicine by Dr. Hammer. That had I believe he had prostate cancer after he lost his son or something. I have to remember the story, but he had a major loss. And he realized that the emotional trauma gets stored in the body and the tissues. So he identified certain organs with certain conditions and certain stories. So, for example, pneumonia that we all associate as a bacterial infection is the feeling of powerlessness, not being able to fight back or even breathe and survive in, which is why your respiratory system gets affected. Digestive issues, depending on what the symptom is not being able to digest a traumatic memory, so it gets stuck there and it's not letting it to move. Now, the opposite of running to the bathroom 24/7 is, this is too painful for me to digest. I need to push it out. So you have to go. So it's very good identifying the brain part. I'm not fully trained. I just know the basic foundation of the course. You find the body part. You find which part of the brain it affects, because each part of the brain works a little different. And there's usually a theme that we can identify. And then we go to the client and find out which memories they have that match that theme. Like someone who has difficulty going to the bathroom to urinate, they may have had traumatic experience that they didn't feel safe to mark their territory. Because what do animals do when they feel safe? They mark their territory. So if they're not able to do that, there's something that's replaying that they're constantly not feeling safe in their environment. Therefore, even though we don't mark our territory anymore, but we have some remnants from those behaviors. And then that can help guide the person, bring traumatic memories up and clear them. So we don't relive the traumatic memories. I want to make that clear. We bring them up to release the emotional charge. And we have a lot of techniques where the person doesn't have to relive them.
Which kind of makes it separate from like your traditional therapy, where you go back and you relive the trauma, you relive it, relive it, relive it, relive it. But you do not necessarily, and I'm not at all, whatever traditional therapy, because I have this right place, but we're not releasing stuff. We're staying in the past and be like, okay, well, how do we heal from it? But in order to heal it, we have to release these emotions. We have to release what's stuck inside of our body, because it's just going to create more and more and more damage.
Yeah. You have to feel the emotion in order to let it go. So there's the work of Dr. David Hawkins, who was a psychotherapist, who addresses the shortcoming for psychotherapy, because the attention is not to focus on neutralizing the emotion. So the key has to be less talk and letting the emotion be neutralized, felt to be neutralized, so it leaves. It's like having a clogged pipe. You need to somehow open it to start draining out.
And a lot of times I feel like people's first step is like recognizing and getting to that point of that emotion of like, some people, when you're down so much, you're not really feeling emotions. Over, you're like, I don't know which emotion it is. I have like 1,000 emotions going on. I feel like you have to get, what that exact emotion is. And I feel like the techniques you offer help people do that.
And it takes a while for people. In the beginning, I would feel the emotion in my head, but I didn't know what the sensation was in the body. When they'd ask me, where do you feel? Well, I don't know. What does it feel like in the body? Well, I don't know. I knew that I was angry, but I was angry in my head. Didn't know. And then eventually I started getting the tightness and the this. And even Chinese medicine tells us, the liver holds anger, the kidneys hold fear, the heart holds heartbreak.
It's really just, I think, calming down your nervous system enough to be able to process through these emotions. Because if we're still on this of just like constant go, 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 and the tiger's chasing us, if we don't stop and calm down from that, for able to process those emotions.
Correct. So you brought something interesting that I think the audience it would be very helpful for the audience to know. So when we are in our active beta brainwaves, first of all, it's not the information or the solution is not going to be processed. Neither will you get information from anywhere else. Affirmations are not going to work. So you could be doing all the affirmations and all the tapping in the world, because some people know how to tap, because I've done it, being completely disconnected from the body and just tapping with no awareness and not slowing down. It's not going to work. So when you do the tapping properly, you can enter after a few rounds in alpha brainwaves. Now the person or the individual gets what they call a cognitive shift. Some people call it a download, or seeing the situation from another perspective that releases that situation that was held so tight.
That down and explaining that was fantastic. So, yeah.
You're welcome.
So as we're kind of closing up, tell me, what is the number 1 or 2, 3, how many tips you want to give out for people who want to get started with this?
First of all, I want to tell them, no matter where they're at, it doesn't matter, they can change. That's number 1. Number 2, even if you don't know how to tap, there's tons of videos on the internet. You can just acknowledge what it is that you're feeling, where you're feeling it, and what the situation is in the present moment. Why the present moment? Because all creation happens in the now. So you can go ahead and start tapping without knowing too much till you find someone. Now, if you do have trauma or you have a lot of difficult, challenging experience, I do advise you get someone. Now, if none of this helps, you can come to my website, and I do offer a complimentary session. You can get some information, learn what it's all about, or address what your situation, if it's going to work for you, though EFT does not have any negative side effects. So there's no complications, so it's always safe. So there's nothing to worry about. And the good thing is, after you've done tapping, you use it on your own and you learn how to do it. And if you do work with me, the requirement is that you do tap on your own on your days off. I also teach Dr. Joe's Dispenza's course, which I am very happy. I'm one of his trainers, and it's called Change Your Mind, Create New Results. It's about 17 hours, and it does include an EFT session, and it's very interactive. So if you're ready to change your life, you're not able to go to a retreat, or you don't know what his work is all about, or you want to do a smaller portion versus the intensive that he does at his events, I teach the course, and I teach combination of packages. And I'd be happy to help anybody who's ready to change their life, because it did change mine.
All of her information will be in the show notes, so please reach out to her, especially if you're interested in the stuff. It sounds like she could break it down very easy steps for you. It could be a little overwhelming. So I really appreciate you sharing everything on our show today. Thank you so much, Sophia.
Thank you.